Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Tony Whitbeck. I'm the CEO of Key Management Group, and with me today is Kathy Sweet, and she's our risk mitigation expert. Welcome to today's presentation called What Risks Are Lurking in Your Practice, the risks that every franchisee must know about. So we're really excited to deliver this content to you today. We've had a lot of demand for this subject, and advisors really appreciate the information that we've been able to share with them. Before we jump into the content and before I turn it over to Kathy, I'd like to tell you just a few minutes, a little bit about the services that we offer at Key Management Group. So I like to bucket them really into four categories. We have practice management, outsourcing, human resources, acquisition and legacy planning, and then of course you need to protect your practice in all different areas. So with practice management, we offer our strategic leadership or coaching package. We have an operational performance package where we help you fix 2 or 3 bottlenecks in your operations. We have our complete practice management solution where we work hand in hand with you and your employees around the operations of the business and best practices. We're going to focus on things like workflows and systems and processes, roles, responsibilities, and accountability of the team members. We offer 2 outsourcing services. We do client meeting preparation. We probably do close to 300 client meeting preps every week for advisors across the country. And we do financial plan production similar to what PlanSource does. We offer a host of human resource services around recruiting, onboarding, and offboarding, HR file reviews and compliance, employee handbooks, policies, AFA incentive structures and compensation packages, and how to conduct performance reviews. And then we have a host of acquisition and legacy planning services. So we do business valuations. We do them both for advisors and for the banks that fund acquisitions. We have our turnkey continuity plan that helps protect the value of your practice in the event of death or disability. We offer a deal-making service where the buyer and the seller have found each other, but they're not quite sure what to do next. So we'll do evaluation and help negotiate and structure the deal and provide you with all the legal documents that you need through a law firm. We offer an escrow service. This is often used when you're making a purchase where there's money being held back in escrow for the attrition clause, and so we offer that service as well. We have our practice sales through our Advisor Legacy platform. So for those of you who are interested in buying practices, make sure you visit our website at advisorlegacy.com. And then on that platform, we have our Elite Buyer program, and that's for people who are serious about buying practices. And then you'll see in the middle, protecting your practice. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in our industry because we need to deal with both regulators, the legal field, as well as franchise law. And that's really why we've developed the service that we're offering today, and that's being provided by Kathy Sweet. Kathy used to be the head of risk mitigation for Ameriprise, and she retired about a year ago, spent some time traveling, and then we reached out to her, and she was excited to join our team, so we're really excited to have her with us today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, and she's going to give you just a little bit of background about herself, and then we'll jump into today's presentation. So Kathy?
Thanks, Tony, and thanks, everyone, for joining us today. As Tony said, I've been with Ameriprise for quite some time, or I was with Ameriprise. I was in the industry for 29 years, 26 of which were with IDS, American Express, and ultimately Ameriprise. And I had a number of positions with the firm. My final position and my longest tenure was, as Tony said, leading the risk mitigation department for the field practices, so for platforms 1 and 2. And when most people think about that, they think about the regulatory risk mitigation aspects, and the CSU was part of my organization, the big part of what we did. But in addition to that, there are other areas of risk, especially on the franchise side of the business, that my organization was responsible for. And so a little bit of history, the team was created in 2000 when we rolled into the platform structure. And why my group was created is senior leadership realized that when we made that change, we were taking an already very complex, heavily regulated business and superimposing a new business structure that is also complicated, that has numerous sets of rules and contract law and a variety of things, kind of bringing those together. And in doing so, expanding the different types of risk that you as an individual practitioner would experience. So, Tony, if you want to go to the next page.
We should be on that slide, Kath.
Okay, on mine I'm not, so I'll just keep going. So, as I said earlier, most people in the advisors and people in the corporate office, when they think about risk, they really think about the regulatory side of it. But it also entails a lot of other things. So in addition to disappointed clients, compliant audits, or maybe a client complaint, there are things that you now experience when you enter into partnerships, risks that you encounter when you hire staff or you have clients in your office and maybe somebody falls. So the types of risks we encountered, they kind of expanded over time. And how we learned about a lot of these risks is as we expanded the platform and worked to bring in a lot of flexibility, the AFA role, using limited partnerships and LLCs. We also started getting contacted by advisors who had issues. Maybe they had joined a team and that wasn't working out, and so they were trying to get out of that relationship, or maybe they had an employee who was suing them. And so we learned over 16 years a lot about these different risks that you face. So to bring it to life, I'm going to start by telling you two stories. So the first story I called A Tale of Two Friends. This is a situation, there are two advisors, they were friends, they had known each other for quite some time. And they were talking about growth and decided to merge their practices to take advantage of the economies of scale, of sharing staff, real estate, and having backup support should one of them be out of the office. So they formed a team. And as part of that teaming process, they also started talking about succession planning. And one of the two advisors was a little older than the other, and he had a game plan where he saw himself leading the industry in about 10 years. So as they set up the team and the contracts, they set it up that at year 5, the selling advisor, as I'll refer to him, was going to become an AFA. So he would step into the staff role, still service clients, but those clients would be turned over to the purchasing advisor, and he would continue to work with them for another 5 years. And then at 10 years, he was going to fully retire and leave the practice. So they were very successful, built a really strong practice over the years. Year 5, the gentleman became an AFA and transferred the clients to the purchasing advisor as the primary. And then kind of around year 8, year 9, he decided he wasn't ready to leave the business. So he went and told his partner that he had changed his mind. He wanted to stay with the practice and he would continue as an AFA. And his partner had other plans. He had put together a growth plan. I think he had a brother or a son or someone that was going to come into the practice. And so he told the AFA that no, that wasn't okay, that he had a business plan and they had this agreement. So they went back and forth for quite some time and they couldn't reach alignment and things got messy. So it came into the corporate office and we started working with the two advisors and spent a tremendous amount of time with both of them. And what we found is there was no malicious intent and no one did anything wrong. It's just they had an agreement and one advisor changed his mind. The other one wanted to uphold the agreement as it stood. So it went back and forth for quite some time, and by the time I got involved, it was also already pretty contentious. And that was about a year and a half before I left the firm when I retired. And when I left, it was still going on. So what was the so what to the advisors? Well, how it ended is they spent a tremendous amount of time in mediation, in arbitration, so time out of the practice. And with that mediation and arbitration, there's a tremendous amount of legal costs. And ultimately, a number of clients left because they just weren't comfortable with the contentious nature between the partners and what had once been a team. So Eventually, the selling advisor reestablished a franchise, and he took his clients. And when I left, they were continuing in this battle to resolve the contractual relationship that they had had. So that was one scenario. Second scenario that I call who controls the client. It's a very different situation, and this was brought to my attention. This advisor was referred to me by one of the resources that many advisors use to help them manage their practice. And he had been talking to this advisor and got a little concerned as he was working through the plans and what service they provide, and suggested that I reach out to the advisor. It was a CAC advisor who was just wanting to spend more time with his family, with his teenage son. And he was just really, really tired of the operational side of the business, making sure staff was paid and taxes got paid and all the payroll stuff. And so started talking to his sales leader. And there was another advisor in the region who had already purchased a couple of practices and had built a really strong back office. And so the CAC advisor started talking to him and was in the process of transitioning his practice. That in our first conversation, I had him walk me through what the transaction was going to be. And what he was most excited about is that they were going to set this up as a partial sale, that he would receive a 75% of the value of the practice up front, and 75% of his clients would transfer to the purchasing advisor, and he would retain 25% of those clients. And from his perspective, he could, when he was ready to leave the practice, he would turn over the other 25%. But if he, over time, as his family got older, if he wanted to stay in the business, he would have that 25% of client base that he could use to rebuild his practice. So I started taking a look at the documents and found a couple things that were particularly troubling. The first one is the agreements as written were not legally enforceable because they violated both the franchise agreement, but also the compliance policies and some FINRA regulations. Second, what I thought and perhaps more troubling is that when I read the documents, it wasn't a partial practice sale. The way the sale was set up is when the contract was signed, 100% of the practice and the equity in the practice would transfer to the purchasing advisor. 75% would be paid up front, and then the 25% would be paid. But the clients would have been turned completely over to the purchasing advisor. So I went through it with both advisors, and the good news is because we were able to catch it before the agreement was signed, both advisors and the resource they were using were willing to work through and amend the terms of the agreement and put a formula in for that 25%. So should he want to stay into the practice, he could, and there would be a method for allocation that would be fair and equitable to both of them. So these are two examples, types of transactions that happen every day in the field across different practices. And they're just a couple of the types of critical events that can lead to these issues. So I'm going to flip to, so let's talk about what are the risks in a practice. As I said earlier, when I started, I talked about how heavily regulated we are. And then, like I said, on top of that, we added employment law and franchise law. And one of the things I came to its realization is that it's impossible to keep track of who cares about what and what's a violation of employment law versus independent contractor law. So what I came up with is a kind of a context to think about risk. To think about the risk that you face not just as a financial services practitioner, but the types of risks that I just touched on that you face now as a business owner. And I found that this context is a really simple way to think about it and try to get your head around what type of what type of protection measures you need to have in place within your practice. So the first one is regulatory financial services. And as I indicated, that's probably the most well-known. And that entails a violation of an industry rule, a policy, or a regulation. And the so what to you as advisors is it could be a client complaint, which maybe then there's a fine or discipline, time, could be reputational. Now, the good news in this category is because Ameriprise is a broker-dealer, they are required to have an infrastructure in place, not just to supervise you, but to support you. So you've got your policies and procedures. And Ameriprise spends a tremendous amount of time educating your registered principals, making sure that you have resources available to you should you have an issue. So they're not just there once something bad has happened, but they're there to also help you maneuver through all those rules. And some of those resources I mentioned are the compliance department, your registered principals, your sales leaders, but also your individual supervisors in the centralized supervision unit. When that team was put together, a big piece of the vision was that they would become a collaborative partner for you, and they would get to know your practice, and you would be able to rely on them and reach out to them for help. So if you haven't done that, I would encourage it. Second bucket of risk is legal actions. And basically that's who's going to sue you for what. And what I found over time is that in our society, as you all know, people can sue for any reason. And whether you did anything wrong or not, you're going to result in legal costs, settlements, time, reputation, all of those things that will take you away from your practice and present those risks. So what can you do about that? One of the things Ameriprise has done is built out a pretty full scope or suite of insurance policies that are available to you as a business owner in addition to your E&O that you can use. It's not going to prevent the lawsuits, but will provide some support for the costs, of legal help, settlement costs, maybe arbitration costs if you get into one of these situations. And if you haven't looked on the E&O website on Compass, I'd encourage you to take a look because there's a variety of insurance policies that you can now get that will provide you that kind of umbrella, that parachute, if you will, of financial support should you be faced with a legal action. The third area of risk that I found to be the least understood was your risk as a franchisee. And what I mean by that is under the franchise agreement, you're granted your equity. And that is, for most of you, I'm sure, probably your biggest financial asset as part of your financial plan. Well, what can happen is things happen that can either result in the loss or the total loss or devaluation of the equity you have in your practice, which is the revenue stream from those clients. And so you could lose the practice completely. So if you think about the situation, one of the situations that I described, the individual who had stepped into the AFA role, he had, in essence, by becoming an AFA, he had turned over all of his clients to the purchasing advisor, and he lost control. That he was no longer the servicing advisor, so Ameriprise wouldn't take instructions from him. Or it could be client attrition, like I also saw in that scenario where clients leave because of some issues within the practice, and all of those things can come together and again impact the equity you have and the financial value of your practice. Ameriprise has created some protecting your practice materials that are available to you. A lot of franchise consultants and coaches also have a lot of resources that are available to you in that particular area. So 3 areas of risk, what's the so what to you, and so the resources that are available to you. I found over time that even once I had that framework, that there were some areas and things that needed to be aligned in order for a practice to really be able to put the adequate protection in place. The first thing is the advisor vision and design and practice design. And this is how it's your practice, how you want to operate. Do you want to be in a complex team or solo practitioner? Do you want to have professional alliances? Do you want licensed staff? Those are all decisions you make as a business owner. And that is really, really important as you think about your practice and what safeguards you're going to need. The second thing that needs to be aligned is what you can or can't do. And that's the rules, the regulations, all the stuff I previously talked about. So FINRA, the SEC, employment laws, and one that's frequently not fully thought through is the franchise system and the contract. That there's a business structure there that's unlike any other in the financial services industry that has some complexities that you need to be aware of and ensure that you are aligned as you manage your practice. And then the third area is implementation at Ameriprise. And that is your vision, what you can or can't do, but then how your business, your practice is going to get set up and run by Ameriprise. How are the clients going to be coded? Who's going to be the servicing advisor and who's going to be able to have access to them and support them? Who's going to be the face to the client? Things like the identification of equity and sharing of clients. There are limitations in the systems that Ameriprise has that impact how they can set up a client base. And so while you may have this vision and it's something you can do, there may be certain restrictions or barriers in the operational system that can really unintentionally put you at risk if you're not aware of them or paying attention to them. So I talked about the three areas of risk and alignment and a little bit about the resources that Ameriprise has available to you. But what I want to do now is really focus on some of the other resources that are available to you, both as a practitioner and as a business owner. So on the blue side, when I think about you as a practice, that's servicing and growing your clients. And there's coaches, sales leaders, wholesalers available to you, all there to help you think about product mix and client suitability. The other half that I spend a lot of time talking about is how do you run your daily operations? And much like your clients need different professionals, as a business owner, you need attorneys, CPAs, HR or payroll providers, that they're external resources that no one can do it all for you, but they are there and available to partner with you, with your coach, and make sure that you've got a well-run operations process within your practice. Now we're going to pause here and I'm going to stop talking. And Tony, we're going to do some audience participation.
All right, thank you, Kath. So I'm going to ask 3 questions to our audience today, and this is the participation part. So I'm going to ask you to select the best answer on your screen. So the first question I'm going to ask is, are you in a practice with AFAs or other servicing advisors? A simple yes or no. Okay, we're still waiting on some people to vote. This is the point where you turn away from your TV and come back to the screen. All right, I'm going to close it off. And 33% of you said that you are in a practice with AFAs or multiple advisors, and 2/3 or 67% are not. Let's go on to question number 2. Do you have a written contract with each employee or associate? A simple yes or no. And this is not the Ameriprise AFA agreement or paraplanner agreement. This is your employment agreement or independent contractor agreement. All right, we're still waiting on a few people. If you could please cast your vote. Okay, we got 80% of the votes in. I'm going to close it out. And the answer, 100% of you do not have written agreements with your AFAs or your employees. I can't emphasize enough how important this is to protect you and your practice. All right, let's go to the last question. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you that the contracts or agreements could be enforced legally? They're within franchise agreements and they're set up within the home office system. So I guess if you don't have any agreements, you aren't all that confident. 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. So if you could please cast your vote and give it a 1 if you have 0 agreements. Okay, I'm going to close that out, and not surprisingly, sorry about that. Not surprisingly, we had 100% of the viewers today with a 1, meaning that they have low confidence in their contracts or agreements. All right, so Kath, I'm going to turn it back over to you to continue on.
Yeah, and even though you don't have contracts, there are things that you can do right now to take a look at where your practice stands. If you don't have, if you're working with a coach or your sales leader, just talk it over with them and get a sense of your practice. But what's going to be important is, should you have contracts, is that you keep them current. So we have found that even advisors with contracts, they might be 4 or 5 years old. And so there's always a need to, once you set them up, to make sure they stay current. And by staying current, that doesn't mean you have to go back to a lawyer or a CPA. It's just be cognizant of changes to your practice. And once a year, take a look to say, boy, is it set up the way I want it to be? The second thing, it's important to go in and look at and check with the corporate office to look at how your accounts are coded. And what I mean by that is how Ameriprise has set up your clients to ensure that your equity is protected. And this is one of those areas where over time, Ameriprise built in a lot of flexibility. So on any given client, there's going to be someone that is coded as the servicing advisor. And that is the individual who is servicing the client, making the recommendations, executing the trades and the transactions. And they're the ones who are regulatorily accountable. The second one is, who's the primary advisor? And the primary advisor, that's the indicator that Ameriprise uses to show who has equity in the client. And so if you're the advisor and you have your client and your equity, even if maybe you didn't make any changes or requests, or maybe you have added new clients or things change over time, and errors get made at the corporate office. So I think it's important for you to go in periodically, and if not with your whole practice, then to take a look at your top clients, your key clients, and make sure that you are appropriately set up as the primary advisor. And if you're not, you can work with your sales leader, your RP, et cetera, to get that cleaned up in the corporate office, because things happen, mistakes are made. And then the final one is face to the client, and that's more of a marketing piece in terms of who in the practice gets represented the clients a certain way. So again, that's something that I encourage practices to go in and look at. It's not every year, periodically, but really pay close attention to those clients that you value the most. Third thing that's available to you, and that's what we're going to get into, is through KMG, we have put together 2 different types of services available to help you get the right measures in place to ensure that your practice is protected. And so I'm going to go to the next page and talk first of all about the comprehensive practice protection. And what this one is, and again, since for this group, this may not be the most applicable right now, but as you grow your practice, it's important, as I said earlier, to make sure that things are current. So we have a comprehensive assessment that we will go in and do and take a look at the risks in your practice by certain areas to make sure that you've got full disclosure, that you've got the right dissolution terms, that there are non-compete agreements. So you think back to some of the scenarios I described earlier, make sure that once your vision is set, that you've got the documents in place to ensure the right transition as you move through your practice. So that's kind of for practices that, again, have multiple participants, a lot of agreements in place. But we also have a specific consulting service that really is just focused on working with you and your team, or with you individually, to look at, if you don't have contracts, what contracts do you need? If you're going to grow your practice and it's at staff over time, how to think about the risks and how to mitigate the risks that come from adding additional registered people to your practice. And some of the sample topics there, I indicated if you're setting up contracts, what type of contracts do you need? If you're going to do a succession plan, so going back again to the two scenarios, are those terms balanced? Is there a way out should you change your mind? And that service can be done in person or by phone, and that's done on an hourly basis. So those are the services available through KMG. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to real quick turn it over to Tony to talk about how to find your way on the website and find these services and how to set them up through KMG.
Awesome. Thank you, Kath. I did get a comment from someone that they weren't able to see the slides, and so I apologize. We've had some technical difficulties today here where all of a sudden the system stopped showing my screen and it was showing the wrong screen. So through the majority of the presentation, I think we were okay today. So I apologize for some of those issues. But it's important to understand the different roles that people play. And so oftentimes people are going to have a business coach, and they're going to help them determine things like what is their goals for the next year. Should they be selling clients? Should they be buying clients? Should they be bringing on an AFA? Should they be adding more staff? Then you're going to have someone like Kathy who's really going to help you determine the ways that you can deal with the complexity in the practice and to avoid a lot of the risks that you can face. And then you have outside folks that can actually write documents, meaning attorneys, so that you've documented what you want to accomplish. And so many people work with us as coaches, and we help them grow their business. We just now are offering this practice protection service, and we brought on Kathy's expertise for that area. And then we still leverage outside consultants as well, in particular attorneys, because it's really the attorneys that are responsible for drafting the documents. So if you're interested in learning more about all of our services, and in particular, if you'd like to purchase our comprehensive practice protection service, you can go to our website. You can see the website at the top of the slide here, and that is keymanagementgrp.com. And then you can go to the Services tab, and the first in the drop-down menu there is going to be Assess Your Practice. And then from there, you're going to go to the Practice Protection Assessment. And what will happen is you will be directed to a credit card place to enter your credit card. And then what will happen is you are going to receive an email that's going to give you next steps on what's going to happen. And then Kathy's going to be contacting you. If you want to take advantage of our consulting service, then you'd reach out to us directly, because it's on an hourly basis, and it's not really a package that you can select.
And then, Tony, the one thing I wanted to add is that by participating in this webinar, if you do want to have a conversation with me to just figure out what services you need at this time, I will make myself available to each of you for a 30-minute consultation, no obligation. It's just, I know we put a lot on you today, and just shoot me an email, or I will reach out after the call, and we can get some time on the calendar.
Great offer, Kathy. Thank you. So really what we're trying to do is help you avoid some of these common problems like unenforceable agreements, you're having expectations, you're misunderstanding our expectations between parties, and we don't want you to lose clients. And as Kathy's pointed out, there's really a lot that can go wrong. So I'm going to end with a quote here, and this is a quote from someone working with Kathy. It says, "I'm so glad that I worked with Kathy before I transitioned my practice. I didn't realize that I was giving up control of my clients, nor did I realize that the terms of the contract were stacked against me." So if you're interested, I showed you how to go to our website, but you can also contact us at 888-848-3349. On our website, on the About Us section, you can see Kathy's contact information. You can see here at the bottom, C-Suite at keymanagementgrp.com. Her phone number is listed on our website as well. So at this time, what I'd like to do is open up to some questions. And to ask a question, there's two ways you can do it. On your GoToWebinar control panel, you can either type in a question and I'll read it and we'll do our best to answer it, or you can raise your hand and then I'll unmute your microphone and we can talk directly. So let me just pause for a minute and see if anyone has a question. Well, I don't see any questions. So, Kathy, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your insights with us. And I want to thank everyone who joined today's presentation. Hopefully we didn't scare you too much. I know Halloween's here in a few weeks, but there probably are some risks that are lurking in your practice, and we'd be happy to help you address those. So thanks again for coming and have a great day.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks all.